Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today I'm talking about, I've obviously in the past watched, Gamera movies from 1965 to 1967. So specifically the first three Gamera movies. Gamera the Giant Monster, known as Gamera the Invincible in the English language release. Gamera vs. Baragon and Gamera vs. Gaios. Now I'm saying Gamera. It could be Gamera. I'll probably drift into Gamera a fair bit. I feel like Gamera is probably closer to the way it tends to be pronounced in the Japanese films. So yeah, Gamera. It's hard to know, but yes. So anyway, Gamera comes lurching out of the Arctic in 1965. He's a towering, tusked, turtle-like titan of terror. As you can see from the image. As giant monsters are wont to do, he rampages through Japan, attacking nuclear power plants and draining their power. The military is powerless to stop the menace, until, of course, they do. But nothing can hold a giant monster down for long, and the victory, of course, is only temporary. He soon returned, racking up a film a year through 1971, before the company went bankrupt. The company producing the films went bankrupt. He had a delightfully stupid revival effort in 1980, and before finally returning with a surprisingly good mid-90s reboot. I'll talk about some of the franchise's later efforts, both in their original incarnation and the later incarnations, in future videos. But today I'm going to focus on those first three films, so the first 3 years of the franchise. Now, obviously, this is a kaiju franchise, like Godzilla. So, what are we going to talk about? Well, let's talk about Godzilla. So, obviously, Big G's shadow looms large over the monster movie business. And not unjustly, he's tended to put everyone else in the shade. It helps when, like your first film is really, really good. Like the 1954 Godzilla is a really good film. See it. Gamera is transparently an attempt by rival student Daiei to cash in on the mid-60s success of Tohu's OG kaiju. It's clearly, let's have our own Godzilla. Gamera is huge. He's got fiery breath. He rampages through Japan. It's ticking off all the boxes. About the only things that differentiate him from Godzilla are that he looks like a turtle instead of a dinosaur, and he's capable of flight through the rather improbable method of retracting his head and legs and spinning like a top. And, just as an aside, there may be some kaiju tragics like myself who are now saying, actually, there's eventually a movie where Godzilla flies. And yeah, I'm aware, but it's not a core part of his power set. It's in a movie that a lot of people hate, though I don't. And Gamera definitely got to the whole flying thing first. So, these films are inevitably and quite reasonably going to provoke comparison with Godzilla films, particularly Godzilla films of the same era. And I'll be honest, they don't come well out of that comparison. The very first Gamera film, which is the only one in black and white, is actually a pretty decentish kaiju movie. Like, if you like giant monsters rampaging and people scrambling to try and stop them, it's a decent effort. After that, the film switched to colour, and they need at least two big monsters on screen because Gamera's got to fight somebody. And at that point, the fact that they're being made for about half the price of a Godzilla film from the same era is pretty obvious. The monsters are generally not very impressive. Their design is poor. Their execution isn't great. And when your selling point is watch two monsters, two big monsters duke it out, or, more accurately, being in the 60s, watch two guys in rubber suits duke it out, you want cool-looking monsters that work well, and unfortunately, the Gamera franchise doesn't really deliver. Certainly not to the same extent as Godzilla movies of the same era do. So that's number one. Number two, and again, Godzilla has been both predator and protector in his long, long cinematic history. I mean, the first Godzilla film came out nearly 70 years ago. There's been over 30 Japanese films, if you include the anime ones, as well as 4 US releases. And Godzilla, he seems to have ultimately settled into, to use a wrestling term, a tweener role, where he's not exactly a good guy, but he's very protective of his turf and will fight anything that he considers a threat, which fortunately does not include us. That's certainly his US role today, and it's certainly his role in most Japanese films. The most recent Japanese live-action film, he was an out-and-out threat. It's not bad either, actually. It's, worth a look. Shin Gojira or Shin Godzilla, worth a look. Gamera, on the other hand, goes from terrifying monster to necessary evil to friend to all children in the space of these three films. In the DVD pictured here, Gamera vs. Baragon, which is the second film, he's in that middle stage of necessary evil. Once we reach Gamera vs. Gaios, he's an unabashed hero, and he's remained so ever since. And look, I can kind of see why. I bet you a Gamera plushie is pretty darn cute. But this did lead to marketing the franchise to children, a tactic which continued throughout the original run of films. That does tend to come at a cost, both in terms of the on-screen action, which becomes more and more buffoonish and goofy, and also in terms of one other thing, which is the human factor. Kaiju films almost always have a significant amount of their screen time based around the human cast. There are a number of reasons for that. Number one, they can respond to whatever the threat is. They can narrate the fight scenes to us as we watch them. I'd say like pro wrestling commentary, but pro wrestling commentary is way better, way more entertaining, and also to give us some human characters to identify with and care about. And also to save costs, because filming a bunch of people standing around in a room and talking to each other is much cheaper than a kaiju fight, even the frequently naff ones that Gamera serves up. Now, I could forgive Gamera its fight scenes if the human factor was better. And I'll be clear here, the human factor in Godzilla movies is often bad too. It's either boring and tedious, or it features people who are very unlikable. But, because Gamera movies are marketed to kids, they tend to have child characters front and center, and they tend to be obnoxious little twerps who actively detract from the film. Now, to be fair to the three films I'm talking about here, only Gamera vs. Gaios features an annoying kid, and trust me, he is annoying. But even he is not quite so bad as those of later movies. If you watch later Gamera films, you will actively be hoping that the turtle stops trying to protect these children. They're that frustrating and annoying, and they do actively detract from the movie. So it's an unwelcome trend in the films. It's not at its worst here. Hasn't reached Hurricane Force 10 or anything, but it is there, and it is annoying. That's Gamera. He's like Godzilla's goofy wannabe younger brother, basically. What are we going to talk about next? Well, we're going to talk about the 1959 film A Bucket of Blood. He lived for his art, and his art was murder, which is another Roger Corman film, because the man made a lot of movies, but it's a very interesting one for a number of reasons. Interesting to me anyway, which is why I'm going to talk about it. So we'll be talking about that next time. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this one, and thanks for watching.